Zanazoon, thank you for joining me today, Amaya. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela. My name is Amaya Mishka. I am from Alaska as well. My family is mostly from McGrath, with ancestors before that being from Anvik. We I guess mostly live in Anchorage now. Many people have moved out of McGrath. I, however, have I go back and forth, but I do live in California at this time, although I spent all of my formative years in Alaska.
Can you tell me who your family is?
Sure. So I actually have a few pictures, if that's okay, and I'll just start with the oldest picture that I have. This is my great great grandmother. Her name is Anutka, and she, I don't know a whole lot about her, but I do know that she dog sledded over from Anvik to deliver my grandmother. And this is my great grandmother, Sophie Vanderpool. Sophie worked, I guess, cooking for the miners many years ago. And this is my grandmother, Beatrice Duncan. She she's currently 102 years old. In a month, she's going to be 103. So she was featured in MTNT a few years back as being one of the living
Wow,
Athabascans still alive.
so cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of the lineage. This is my mom who has passed on. Her name is Beatrice Duncan. She was born in McGrath, like all of her siblings. My grandma had 9 siblings total and 8 that survived. And she has 3 remaining. So she's outlived everyone but 3 of my uncles.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure you have lots of historical and ancestral stories about your family. One of the things how we met was that you have a book out. So I wanted to see if you could share some of your background as a writer and what what made you become interested in writing.
Sure. So it's kind of interesting. My family seems to really have an affinity for language, and from the time I was very little, I had a grandfather who kind of talked in rhymes, and they loved to make toasts and tell stories, and so I think I was exposed at a very early age. I didn't, however, know that I wanted to be a writer until I was maybe about 15 years old. And so in high school, I wrote a lot of short stories um, and poetry. And throughout the years, I toyed with the idea of becoming a professional writer, but life kind of happened. I even went as far as to get a meeting in Hollywood with a producer and then somebody who writes reads rather screenplays, and to get some information on that. But life happened, and I went into real estate for a while, quite a while actually. Eventually, the writing just continued to happen, whether I was consciously doing it or not. I started writing short stories, blogs, poetry, and a lot of biographies for people, or bios, and web content. And through that process, I kind of rediscovered that I wanted to write. I wrote a novel about 14 years ago that I chose not to publish. It was kind of can I do this or not? And so that was a first draft, but there was a little voice that always said, this isn't going to be what you're known for. So many years passed, and finally I became inspired again, and I started writing a story about an Athabascan girl. It's science fiction, but it is rooted, I guess, in terms of values and messages, in traditional values of treating all living creatures with respect, and our planet, Mother Earth, with respect. So that's something I've always identified with in our culture. And I wanted to find a way to reach youth by implementing those types of values and stories into a sci-fi novel. So that's what I just completed in November.
Well, what age? You said young people. Approximately what age are you targeting?
Yeah, so it seems that the target audience would be 16 to 35. However, I think anybody who likes Indigenous culture and sci-fi may like the novel. I've had many people read it of all ages. I wouldn't recommend it for probably under 16 just because some of the topics are a little too mature. But I've had people in their 50s and 60s read it and enjoy it. So I think it's just if they like the genre of sci-fi and have an interest in Athabascan culture. I mean, it's lightly touched on and it's kind of weaved in terms of values. But the first chapter in particular kind of goes into the character's history about being Indigenous and from Alaska.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the book is about?
Sure. Yeah. So I've got a copy of it here, and I'll show the cover. This is the cover. Hopefully, that's showing up the right orientation, and you can read the
Yes, it
words.
is. It
Oh,
is the
good.
right Ascension Warriors, Mission
Yeah.
626.
Yes, Ascension Warriors Mission 626. So basically, storyline is about an Indigenous woman who's 26 years old, and she moves far away from home to kind of numb her pain from losing the two closest people in her life, which would be her mother and her first husband. And she becomes an activist kind of naturally because, identifying with her culture, she's passionate about saving the oceans. So she's living her life in the central coast of California, just, into her causes, into fitness and what have you, and happens to meet a man, a very mysterious man who turns out to be a secret agent. And through this process, it changes the entire course of her life as she begins to realize that much of her life was not what she thought it was, and that she has a much bigger purpose on the planet than she could have ever dreamed possible.
That sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
I'm excited to read it. Um, so I guess one of the things and one of the reasons I do the Athabascan Woman blog is to share stories and interview awesome people like you, just to show like a different perspective of what people might see in like mainstream media and other content that's out there about Alaska Native and Indigenous people, and especially Athabascan people. So, can you tell me a little bit about why it's important to share our stories?
I really believe that we're in a time of awakening, and I view that the work that indigenous people are called to do right now on our planet is a call to raise consciousness. I believe that we have ancient values that have been carried down, that have transcended colonization, and these ancient values and I guess, ways of living are things that I believe if we return to, clearly, we live in a modern world and there's things like the internet and that kind of thing. But I believe that if we return to those fundamental ancient values, that we will live a more harmonious life and that things will be more evenly distributed. Imbalances of power can possibly be rectified. Um, you know, Everything from racism to pollution can be influenced, I think, by our traditional values. And I think it's an important time for Natives to find their voices, whether it's through song, dance, you know, um, writing, movie making, anything that speaks to them. And I think that art has always been very dear to our hearts. And I think there's a reason for it. I think that we can reach many people. So I believe that it's our time to step up and to share what we know with others and hopefully inspire them.
Yes, that's awesome. I've heard other people say similar things, and then this whole thing about um, how important Alaska Native beliefs and ways of life and our culture, how it helps to sustain Mother Earth is like people are discovering it, but we've lived like this for, thousands and thousands of years. So it's great to see it start being recognized more. That's awesome that you're able to be inspired by that and bring that to the forefront in a fun way, in a sci-fi novel. By the way, are you planning more books in this with this character or similar books?
Yes. So I branded Ascension Warriors to become a series, and the ultimate goal is to adapt to film, which I'm working on right now. And so it's an exciting time. I've seen and been networking with a bunch of Indigenous youth in Canada in particular, some in Alaska as well. And actually, I should mention this as well. The model on the cover, believe it or not, is an Inuit actress named Olivia Kate Iatridis. And so,
Cool.
yeah, she's based out of Canada, and she has a new movie coming out called Abducted. I think it's going to be out maybe in a month or so. So anyway, what I thought would be super cool, and the theme is to feature an Indigenous role model or public figure on each cover of the series if possible. I'm debating if I'm going to do another female character, but I have a story kind of formulating in my mind about a boy. So I might go that route as well. Kind of, but that one should be done by the end of this year, and I'm still toying with some ideas. But yes, the plan will be to release one per year on average for the next 10 years or so.
That sounds so exciting. And a film. Oh my goodness. I wish you so much luck getting that created. You mentioned earlier about like needing to find the courage to continue on and create a new, I guess it was a new book.
Mhm.
But how did you get that courage and what was your inspiration? Because some writers might be thinking about a book and they just might, for a lot of reasons, not go forward and publish something. So, how did you find your inspiration and courage?
That's an excellent question, actually, and I think it's something that all of us artists struggle with from time to time. But it is important to identify what's inspiring, and I believe that for me, it was, believe it or not, hypnotherapy. I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist as well, and I have a hypnotherapist. Right before the story kind of came to me, I went and had a session. Didn't have a lot of direction as to what I was really searching for, and interestingly enough, I didn't understand the session for about a year. And after a year, I look back and I go, oh my gosh, everything I'm writing about, which was, by the way, I wouldn't say nothing I was interested in before, but I had kind of put sci fi on the back burner since I was a kid, um, was in the book. And so it wasn't something I realized right away. But when I look back, I said there's something in the subconscious that was lingering in there, just kind of waiting to come out. So I always recommend it's a useful tool. Some people do meditation and others do hypnotherapy, but that's what I credit to the story coming out.
Wow, that's inspiring. That it sounds like, and I feel like some of my greatest creations, whether it's writing or beading or, you know, raising my children, have come from a healing place. So that's pretty inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about starting to write, and how do they persevere and get something done?
My advice now that I can look back after all of these years and the lengthy process it was for me to get to the point where I just embraced it and decided to do it seriously is to always listen to the small voice inside. And if something is calling you to create art in any form, that there should be time set aside to cultivate that inspiration. and life happens, and, bills happen. But if you can find the quiet space, wherever that is, where you can create, then I think it's wise to kind of schedule time out for that. Always make sure that if your heart desires something, that you take time to do it.
Great advice. Do you have anything else you want to share about other passions or interests?
I've always been very drawn to native dancing. I did native dancing when I was a little girl. At that time, my family lived in Haines, Alaska, so it was clicket dancing that we did. Um, and I remember, I remember quite a little bit of a culture shock in moving from a small town like Haines to Anchorage, and um, just kind of being more stimulated and seeing a lot more things than I had experienced when I was in the Southeast. So, I guess I would say that travel is a passion of mine. And although I always will, hold Alaska and the Arctic land dear to my heart because it's my roots and it's where my family is from, I would encourage people to travel as well and to experience other cultures. I think that it's really important, particularly in these times of in political uproar and upheaval, that we learn about not just our indigenous culture, but other indigenous cultures, and that we come together. So I found a lot of value in networking with other people, and there's a lot of support out there. So if anyone is, seeking support in their art and their career, I think tapping into those networks, those Facebook groups, and just like you and I connected through Facebook, it would have been hard to meet you otherwise, with where you live and where I live. I just, love people. I love hearing their stories, and I encourage everyone to just kind of come together. And so I think that's all I can really say is my passion is writing, and trying to raise consciousness in whichever way I'm called to do so.
Another question I have is how can people find the book and find you?
Okay, good question. Thank you. So it's relatively easy to find if you know the name of the book. You can either go to my website, amayamishka.com, or ascensionwarriors.com, or you can simply go to Amazon and type in Mission 626. I think that's going to be the easiest way. It usually pops right up. Locally, there's a couple of bookstores that carry the book in Santa Barbara, but in terms of Alaska, I'm still working on contacts up there.
Okay, I'll definitely share the link to your website and then the where they can buy it. So I just want to really thank you, Anna Bassett, for joining me today and sharing a little bit about your background and your book. It's so exciting. Whenever I hear about like Native writers and or just Native people doing things, I just want to share it. So I really appreciate you spending your time because I think it's really inspiring for people to see other people doing things like writing and sharing our stories. And I just want to say a big congratulations to you for this huge accomplishment.
I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your time and the work that you do as well. I think it's awesome that you're, lifting up Indigenous brothers and sisters and sharing the culture with people and inspiring them. So thank you very much.